Stars stretched across the viewport like tiny diamonds scattered on black velvet. Captain Greg Holland pressed his palm against the cold glass and stared into the endless dark. For 3 months, the Frontier Dawn had been traveling through unexplored space, and every day looked the same. Empty, silent, lonely. Greg turned away from the window and walked back to his command chair. The bridge hummed with the quiet sounds of machines working. His crew sat at their station, watching their screens with tired eyes. They had all hoped for something exciting. They had all dreamed of finding something new out here in the void. But space was bigger than anyone could imagine, and it seemed happy to keep its secrets. Lieutenant Kevin Shaw sat at the sensor station, his fingers tapping slowly on the console. He was a young man with brown hair and sharp eyes that never missed a detail. Right now, those eyes looked bored. Commander Lisa Hayes stood near the navigation panel, arms crossed, staring at nothing. She was Greg's second in command, a woman with dark skin and darker hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was smart and careful, and Greg trusted her more than anyone else on the ship. The rest of the crew moved through their routines like robots. Communications officer Danny Price checked his equipment for the 100th time. Pilot Claire Morgan ran another diagnostic on the flight systems. Engineer Pete Carson monitored the engines from his station. Everyone was professional. Everyone was good at their job, but everyone was also incredibly bored. Greg sat down in his chair and let out a long breath. 3 months of nothing. No alien signals, no strange planets, no mysterious anomalies, just the endless void and the slow passage of time. He wondered if this was what all space exploration felt like. Hours and hours of boredom punctuated by brief moments of terror or wonder. So far, they had only experienced the boredom. He was about to suggest they break for lunch when Kevin suddenly sat up straight in his chair. His hands moved quickly across his console and his eyes went wide. "Captain," Kevin said, and his voice had changed. It was sharp now, alert. "I'm picking up something strange." Greg felt his heart beat faster. He leaned forward in his chair. "Define strange, Lieutenant." Kevin's fingers danced across the screen. Numbers and charts appeared and disappeared. "Multiple contacts, sir. Large ones. They just appeared at the edge of our sensor range. 1 second there was nothing, and the next second they were there. It's like they appeared out of nowhere." Lisa moved quickly to Kevin's station and looked at his screen. Her eyes narrowed. "Configuration unknown. No match in our database. These aren't human ships." The words hung in the air like a held breath. Not human ships. Greg felt something cold and electric run down his spine. This was it. This was what humanity had been searching for, hoping for, dreading. First contact with alien life. "How many ships?" Greg asked. His voice sounded calm, which was good. Inside, his mind was racing. 7 contacts, sir," Kevin replied. "And they're big, really big. Each one is at least 10 times our size." Greg stood up from his chair. His training took over, pushing away the fear and excitement. "Battle stations. All crew to alert status, but keep our weapons cold. Do not power up any offensive systems. Lisa, get me a priority channel to Earth Command." The bridge lights shifted from white to amber. An alarm beeped 3 times, then went silent. Throughout the ship, crew members stopped what they were doing and rushed to their emergency positions. The Frontier Dawn had trained for this moment. They had run drills dozens of times, but drills were different from reality. Everyone knew that. Greg watched the tactical display as 7 massive signatures appeared on the screen. They formed a loose half-circle around the Frontier Dawn. It looked like they were surrounding the ship, trapping it. Greg tried not to think about that. "Channel to Earth established," Lisa said. "Priority Alpha, they're receiving our situation report now." "Good, keep that line open." Greg turned to Danny. "What about those ships? Are they sending any signals?" Danny shook his head. "Nothing yet, sir. They're just sitting there, watching us maybe." The bridge fell into an uneasy silence. Everyone stared at the tactical display, watching the 7 large signatures that surrounded their small ship. Seconds ticked by, then minutes. The waiting was worse than anything else. Greg found himself holding his breath without meaning to. Then Danny's console lit up. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission, audio and visual. The signal is strong. Our translation software is working on it now." Greg felt his mouth go dry. This was it. The moment that would change everything. The moment when humanity would no longer be alone in the universe. He straightened his uniform and squared his shoulders. "Put it on screen," he ordered. The main viewport flickered. The stars disappeared, replaced by an image that made everyone on the bridge go very still. The alien appeared before them, and it was like nothing Greg had ever imagined. It was tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet if it had been standing next to a human. Its body was thin and graceful, with 4 arms that moved slowly in the air. Its skin was strange. It seemed to shimmer and change color, shifting between blue and silver like oil on water. The face was long and narrow, with a small mouth and no visible nose, but the eyes were the most striking feature. They were large and completely black, except for colors that swirled inside them like tiny galaxies. The colors moved and changed as the alien looked at them. When the alien spoke, its mouth barely moved. The words came through the speakers in choppy, broken English. The translation software was working, but not perfectly. "Human vessel," the alien said. Its voice was high and musical like wind chimes. "You are, surrender, immediate, we claim, this region by right of, the collective assembly." Greg felt Lisa tense beside him. He kept his face neutral and his voice steady. "I am Captain Greg Holland of the Earth ship Frontier Dawn. We are on a peaceful scientific mission. We mean no harm to anyone and we claim no territory." The alien tilted its head to one side. It was a strange gesture, neither human nor animal. "You will, power down, systems, we scan, your vessel, resistance is, punishment." Greg felt everyone on the bridge looking at him, waiting for his response. His mind worked quickly. A scan. They wanted to scan the ship. That would give them access to everything. The ship's computer systems held maps leading back to Earth. They held information about human technology, human weapons, human defenses. They held data about Earth's population, its resources, its vulnerabilities. Lisa leaned close to his ear and whispered, "Sir, we can't let them scan us. They'll get everything. The navigation charts back to Earth, our weapons specifications, the Prometheus drive blueprints, everything." Greg knew she was right, but he also knew that the 7 ships surrounding them were each 10 times larger than the Frontier Dawn. If they wanted to scan the ship by force, they probably could. And if he refused too strongly, they might just destroy the ship instead. He had to try diplomacy. It was all he had. "We respectfully decline your request," Greg said, choosing his words carefully. "We're willing to discuss peaceful relations and share information through proper diplomatic channels, but we cannot allow an invasive scan of our systems." The alien's colors shifted. The silver faded and more blue appeared. The eyes swirled faster. "You refuse the collective assembly. This is mistake." The screen went black. The stars reappeared. The bridge was silent except for the hum of the machines and the sound of people breathing. "Sir," Kevin said, and his voice was tight with tension. "They're powering up weapons. Multiple targeting systems are locking onto our hull. I'm reading energy spikes across all 7 ships." Greg gripped the armrest of his chair. "Evasive maneuvers now. Claire, get us out of here." Claire's hands flew across her controls. The Frontier Dawn lurched to the side as the engines roared to life. On the tactical display, their ship's icon began to move, trying to break free of the surrounding alien vessels. But before they could escape, every console on the bridge exploded with light. Not literally exploded, but the screens all lit up so bright it was painful to look at. Alarms screamed from every direction. The ship shuddered and shook like something had grabbed it and wouldn't let go. "What's happening?" Greg shouted over the noise. Kevin's face was lit by the glowing screen in front of him. He looked frightened. "They hit us with some kind of pulse, sir. It's not a weapon, not exactly. It's a scanning beam, but it's incredibly powerful. It's pushing through our firewalls like they're not even there. It's invasive and aggressive, and it's tearing into our computer systems." "Cut power to the main computer core," Greg ordered. "Do it now. Isolate our databases." "I'm trying, sir," Kevin said, his hands moving frantically. "But it's too fast, too powerful. They're already inside our systems. They're copying everything. Ship specifications, crew records, Earth's location, our military capabilities, our entire history database. Everything." Greg felt helpless. He could only watch as streams of data flowed from their ship to the alien vessels. Information that had taken humanity thousands of years to accumulate was being stolen in seconds. The aliens were learning everything about Earth, about humans, about who they were and where they came from. Lisa grabbed his arm. "Greg, we need to do something. They're going to know everything." But there was nothing to do. Greg watched the data transfer on the tactical display and felt a crushing sense of failure. He had made first contact with alien life, and within minutes he had given them everything they needed to find Earth and potentially destroy it. Then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The bright lights on the consoles dimmed. The alarms went quiet. The shaking ceased. The bridge returned to its normal state except for the sound of people breathing hard and the smell of overheated electronics. "What happened?" Lisa asked, breaking the silence. Kevin stared at his console with his mouth hanging open. "Sir, I think they stopped the scan. Voluntarily. The data transfer just ended. They're not taking any more information." "Damage report," Greg ordered, trying to understand what was happening. "Minor systems overload," Pete Carson reported from the engineering station. "Nothing critical. We can repair everything in a few hours, but Captain, look at this." Pete transferred his readings to the main display. Greg saw what he meant immediately. The 7 alien ships were still there, still surrounding the Frontier Dawn, but something had changed. Their power signatures were fluctuating wildly. The energy readings spiked and dropped in irregular patterns. It looked like the ships were having some kind of problem or their crews were panicking. "Are they in distress?" Lisa asked. "I don't know," Kevin said, "but something's definitely wrong with them. All 7 ships are showing the same strange readings." The communications panel beeped. Danny looked up with surprise. "Sir, they're hailing us again, the same alien as before." Greg exchanged a glance with Lisa. She looked as confused as he felt. "Put them on screen." The main viewport changed again. The same alien appeared, but it looked completely different now. Its shimmering skin had turned a dull, flat gray. The colors in its eyes were moving chaotically, bleeding into each other in ways that looked wrong. If Greg had to describe its expression, he would have said it looked terrified. "Human, Captain." The alien's voice came through the translator, but it was different now. Faster, more urgent, less choppy. "We have made grave error. We withdraw. Our claim, please do not follow us." Greg stood up. "Wait, what did you find in our systems? What frightened you?" The alien's eyes swirled faster. The colors mixed together until they were almost black. "Your species, you are death singers, planet breakers, the madness in your history, your wars, your weapons, your persistence. You hunt your own kind, for sport, for ideology, for land. You are the ones the ancient texts warned of." Lisa stepped forward, her voice strong. "Our history isn't all war. We've achieved peace. We've built civilizations. We create art and music. We explore and learn." "Yes," the alien said, and now its voice was shaking. Greg could hear it even through the translation. "That is what terrifies us. You make beauty and horror in equal measure. You split the atom, then you split it again for destruction. You reached your moon before you mastered your own peace. You argue, you fight, you destroy. Then you rebuild, stronger every time." The alien paused. Its 4 arms moved in agitated patterns. "Your ship, this vessel, carries weapons that could glass a planet, yet you call it a science ship. You explore with weapons. You seek peace with guns. You are contradiction. You are impossible. You are dangerous beyond measure." Greg felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had never thought of humanity that way. The Frontier Dawn did carry weapons. Substantial weapons. More weapons than most exploration vessels from other missions. But that was just smart, wasn't it? Space was dangerous. They needed to be able to defend themselves. Every human ship carried weapons. It was normal, standard procedure. But maybe it wasn't normal for everyone else. Maybe other species didn't arm their science vessels like warships. Maybe other species had learned peace before they learned how to destroy planets. "We carry weapons for protection," Greg said carefully. "Not for conquest, not for aggression. We don't want to hurt anyone." "You say protection," the alien replied. "Your own records show 63 major conflicts in the last 2 centuries alone. Your species achieved space flight while still fighting wars on your home world. You reached the stars before you stopped killing each other. You are impossibly dangerous, impossibly creative. We want no part of this." The screen went black again. This time it stayed black. On the tactical display, the 7 alien ships suddenly vanished. They didn't fly away. They didn't fade slowly. One moment they were there, surrounding the Frontier Dawn. The next moment they were gone, leaving nothing but empty space and confused sensor readings. The bridge was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Everyone was trying to process what had just happened. Finally, Danny broke the silence. His voice was small and uncertain. "Sir, should we try to follow them? Should we attempt to reestablish contact?" Greg slowly sat back down in his chair. His legs felt weak. "No, let them go. I think we've made quite the impression already." Lisa turned to face him. Her expression was complicated, confused, worried, maybe a little bit proud. "Captain, what just happened? They scanned us and then they ran away. They fled in terror. We didn't fire a shot. We didn't even threaten them." "They didn't scan our weapons, Lisa," Greg said quietly. Was still trying to understand it himself. "They didn't scan our technology or our defenses. They scanned our history. They saw who we are, what we've done, what we're capable of, and that was enough. That was more than enough." Kevin spoke up from his station. "I'm tracking their departure trajectory, sir. They're not just leaving this system, they're leaving this entire sector, fast. Whatever they saw in our database, it scared them badly." Greg nodded slowly. He felt strange. Not proud, exactly. Not ashamed either, just aware. Aware of humanity in a way he had never been before. The aliens had held up a mirror and the reflection was complicated. Beautiful and terrible, creative and destructive, peaceful and violent, all at the same time. "Send a message to Earth Command," Greg ordered. "Priority 1. First contact has been achieved. Results are inconclusive. Recommend extreme caution in all future encounters. And have our computer specialists prepare a full analysis of exactly what data the aliens accessed. I want to know what they saw. I want to know what scared them so much." The crew returned to their stations and began working. The bridge slowly returned to normal operations, but nothing felt normal anymore. Nothing would ever feel normal again. Humanity had met alien life, and the aliens had run away in fear. Not fear of human weapons or technology. Fear of humans themselves. Fear of what humanity represented. Greg stood up and walked back to the viewport. He pressed his hand against the cold glass and stared out at the stars. They looked the same as before, tiny diamonds on black velvet, but everything had changed. Somewhere out there, 7 alien ships were fleeing as fast as they could. And somewhere out there, more aliens would hear about what happened. They would hear about humanity. They would hear about the Death Singers and the Planet Breakers. Greg wondered what that would mean for Earth's future. Would other species avoid them? Would they fear humans the way those first aliens had feared them? Or would some species see humanity as a threat that needed to be eliminated before it grew too powerful? He didn't have answers. Nobody did. But he knew one thing for certain. Humanity's entry into the galactic community was going to be complicated. Very complicated. Behind him, Lisa approached quietly. She stood next to him and looked out at the stars too. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Do you think they're right about us?" Lisa finally asked. "Are we really that dangerous?" Greg thought about the question. He thought about human history, the wars, the genocides, the nuclear weapons, the environmental destruction. But he also thought about the art, the music, the medicine, the acts of kindness and sacrifice, the people who dedicated their lives to making the world better. The slow, painful progress toward peace. "I think we're complicated," he said finally. "I think we contain multitudes, as the old poet said. We're capable of terrible things, but we're also capable of wonderful things. The aliens saw all of it and they couldn't handle the contradiction. They couldn't calculate the risk. They couldn't predict what we would do, so they ran." "Maybe that's for the best," Lisa said softly. "Maybe we need more time before we meet the rest of the galaxy. More time to figure out who we want to be." "Maybe," Greg agreed. "Or maybe the galaxy needs to meet us exactly as we are, flaws and all, contradictions and all. Maybe honesty is better than pretending to be something we're not." Lisa smiled just a little. "That's very philosophical of you, Captain." "First contact will do that to you," Greg replied. He managed a small smile too. They stood together at the viewport, watching the stars, thinking about the future. The Frontier Dawn continued its journey through space. Behind them, Earth waited for news. Ahead of them, the galaxy waited to see what humanity would do next. Greg knew that word would spread. The collective assembly would tell other species about the humans, about the Death Singers who wrote poetry, about the Planet Breakers who built hospitals, about the species that reach for the stars while still learning to love each other. Some species would be curious. Some would be frightened. Some would be hostile. But humanity would face it all. They always had. That was what the aliens had seen in their history. Humanity didn't quit. Humanity didn't surrender. No matter how many times they were knocked down, they got back up. Sometimes they got back up stronger than before. Sometimes they learned from their mistakes. Sometimes they didn't. But they always got back up. That persistence, that refusal to accept defeat, that was what had terrified the aliens. Because persistence combined with intelligence and creativity and powerful weapons was a dangerous combination. It was unpredictable, it was incalculable, it was human. Greg turned away from the viewport finally. He had a report to write. Earth Command would want to know everything. They would want details. They would want analysis. They would want recommendations. And he would give them all of that. But he wasn't sure how to capture the most important part in words. How do you explain to people that aliens took one look at humanity and fled in terror? How do you explain that the simple truth of human existence was weapon enough? How do you explain that the galaxy wasn't afraid of human guns or bombs or ships? The galaxy was afraid of human persistence, human adaptability, human refusal to give up or back down or accept limits. He would try to put it in words. He would do his best. But he suspected that Earth Command wouldn't truly understand until they experienced it themselves, until they saw the fear in alien eyes, until they realized that humanity's greatest strength and greatest weakness was the same thing. Humans were survivors. Humans were fighters. Humans were creators and destroyers. Humans were walking contradictions who somehow managed to balance on the knife edge between civilization and chaos, and they had been doing it for their entire history. The aliens had seen all of that in their database. They had seen 10,000 years of human history compressed into files and records. They had seen the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of ideologies, the creation and destruction of weapons, the wars that killed millions and the peace movements that saved millions. They had seen it all and they had drawn their conclusions. Humanity was dangerous, not because humans were evil, not because humans were violent by nature, but because humans were unpredictable, because humans contained contradictions that other species apparently did not, because humans could be peaceful one moment and violent the next, because humans could build and destroy with equal passion and skill. Greg sat back down at his command chair and began writing his report. The words came slowly at first, then faster. He tried to capture everything he had seen and heard and felt. He tried to explain what it meant for humanity's future. He tried to warn Earth Command about the challenges ahead, but even as he wrote, he felt a strange sense of pride. Humanity had scared off 7 warships without firing a shot, without even trying, just by being themselves, just by existing and having history. That was something. That was really something. The Frontier Dawn sailed on through the void. The crew returned to their normal routines, but nothing felt quite normal anymore. Everyone moved a little differently. Everyone spoke a little more quietly. Everyone was processing what had happened in their own way. And far away, racing through space at incredible speeds, 7 alien ships carried news back to the collective assembly. News about the humans, news about Earth, news about the species that the ancient texts had warned about, the Death Singers, the Planet Breakers, the ones who refused to die. The galaxy would learn about humanity soon enough, and the galaxy would have to decide how to respond, with fear, with curiosity, with hostility, with friendship. Time would tell. But for now, on the bridge of the Frontier Dawn, Captain Greg Holland finished his report and sent it to Earth Command. Then he stood up, stretched his tired muscles, and looked at his crew. They looked back at him with questions in their eyes. "All right, everyone," Greg said, making his voice sound confident and calm. "We've made first contact. It didn't go exactly as planned, but we're all still alive and the ship is intact. That counts as a success in my book. Let's continue our mission. Let's continue exploring, and let's be ready for whatever comes next." The crew nodded. They returned to their work. The bridge hummed with activity once more, and the Frontier Dawn continued its journey into the unknown, carrying with it the hopes and fears and contradictions of the human race. Greg settled back into his command chair and watched the stars stream past. He thought about home. He thought about Earth, spinning peacefully in space, unaware that everything had just changed. He thought about the billions of people living their lives, going to work, raising families, pursuing dreams, never knowing that aliens now knew exactly where to find them. He hoped humanity was ready for what came next. He hoped Earth Command would make wise decisions. He hoped the aliens who fled today would not come back tomorrow with weapons and armies. He hoped that curiosity would win out over fear in the hearts of other species. But hope was all he had. Hope and the knowledge that humanity would face whatever came with the same stubborn persistence that had carried them through thousands of years of history. The same persistence that had terrified 7 alien warships into fleeing without a fight. The stars continued their eternal dance across the viewport. The ship continued its voyage through the void. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the future waited to unfold. The message from the Frontier Dawn reached Earth 12 hours later, traveling through space at the speed of light. It arrived at Earth Command headquarters in Geneva at 3 in the morning local time, but within minutes, every important person in the world was awake and reading it. The news spread like wildfire through government buildings and military bases. Humanity had made contact with aliens. And the aliens had run away in fear. Admiral Frank Cooper was a large man with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had fought in 3 wars and commanded the Earth Defense Fleet for the past 7 years. Nothing surprised him anymore, or so he had thought. But as he read Captain Holland's report for the 3rd time, he felt something he rarely felt: confusion mixed with a strange kind of pride. He stood in the emergency council room, surrounded by holographic projections of the most powerful people on Earth. Directors of space programs, military generals, scientists, politicians. Everyone looked tired, everyone looked worried, but everyone also looked fascinated. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Admiral Cooper said, his deep voice filling the room. 7 alien warships, each one 10 times the size of our exploration vessel, surrounded the Frontier Dawn. They demanded surrender. They scanned our ship against our will, and then they fled in terror. "Is that accurate?" Director Patricia Stone nodded. She was the head of the Science Council, a thin woman with white hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "According to Captain Holland's report, yes. The aliens accessed our historical databases. They saw records of human conflicts, human weapons development, and human persistence. And their response was to withdraw immediately and leave the sector at high speed. They called us Death Singers and Planet Breakers," added General Nathan Boyd. He was younger than the Admiral, with dark skin and a military bearing that never relaxed. "According to the translation, those terms appear in their ancient texts, like we're some kind of nightmare species that their ancestors warned them about." Admiral Cooper sat down heavily in his chair. "So we scared them, without firing a shot. Without even trying. We just showed them who we are, and that was enough." "It appears so," Patricia said. She pulled up a holographic display showing the data the aliens had accessed. "They downloaded our entire historical archive, every war, every peace treaty, every technological advancement, every cultural achievement. They saw everything from the Roman Empire to the climate wars. They saw us splitting atoms for both energy and weapons. They saw us reaching for the stars while still fighting each other on Earth. And they concluded we're too dangerous to deal with," Admiral Cooper said. "It wasn't a question." "Or too unpredictable," Patricia replied. "From what we can tell, they couldn't calculate our threat level. We don't fit their models. We're simultaneously peaceful and violent, creative and destructive. We explore with weapons and seek knowledge while maintaining vast military forces. We're a contradiction that their logic can't process." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, someone spoke up. It was Ambassador Chen Wei, an elderly diplomat who had negotiated peace in dozens of international conflicts. His voice was soft, but everyone listened when he spoke. "This could be very bad for us," he said quietly. "If the aliens spread word about humanity, other species might decide we're a threat that needs to be eliminated. They might attack us before we become too powerful, a preemptive strike. Or," Patricia countered, "some species might be curious, some might want to understand us, some might see value in connecting with a species that thinks differently than they do." "We can't assume anything," Admiral Cooper said firmly. "We need to prepare for every possibility. I'm ordering the defense fleet to full alert status. Every ship in service needs to be ready for combat. Every defense station needs to be armed and operational. We also need a diplomatic strategy, Ambassador Chen said. If more aliens make contact, we need to know how to respond. We need protocols. We need training. We need to understand what we did wrong with the collective assembly and how to do better next time. The meeting continued for hours. Plans were made. Orders were given. Resources were allocated. Earth was preparing for a future that had suddenly become much more complicated. But while the leaders of Earth worried and planned, something unexpected was happening in space. The news of the human encounter was spreading through the galactic community, and not everyone was reacting with fear. 3 weeks after the Frontier Dawn incident, a small ship appeared at the edge of human-controlled space. It was alone, unarmed, and broadcasting a message of peaceful intent in multiple languages. Earth Command detected it immediately and sent the message to the newly established First Contact Station. Greg Holland had been assigned to command the station. It was a small outpost built hastily at the border of human territory. The station had a crew of 50 people, all trained in diplomacy, xenobiology, and first contact protocols. It also had enough weapons to destroy a small fleet, because Earth was taking no chances. Greg stood in the observation deck, watching the alien ship approach. It was beautiful in its own way. The hull was smooth and curved like a teardrop made of bronze metal. It moved gracefully through space, almost dancing between the stars. It was nothing like the massive warships of the collective assembly. "The ship is requesting permission to dock," Lisa Hayes said. She had been assigned to the station with Greg. She stood at the communications console, her fingers ready to cut the channel at the first sign of trouble. "They say they come in peace. They say they want to talk." Greg took a deep breath. This was it. Another chance at first contact. Another chance to get it right, or another chance to make things worse. "Scan them thoroughly. Look for weapons, hidden ships, anything suspicious. If they're clean, grant permission to dock, but keep our defenses ready." The scans came back clean. The ship was exactly what it appeared to be. A small diplomatic vessel with a crew of 1. No weapons. No hidden surprises. Just one alien who wanted to talk. 20 minutes later, Greg found himself standing in a meeting room, waiting to meet humanity's second alien contact. The room had been designed for this purpose. It was neutral and clean, with adjustable furniture that could accommodate different body types. The air was carefully filtered and monitored. Guards stood outside, ready to respond to any threat. The door opened, and the alien entered. Greg felt his eyes widen slightly. This was a completely different species from the ones who had scanned the Frontier Dawn. This alien looked like a giant insect. It stood about 5 feet tall on 4 legs that bent in ways human legs didn't bend. Its body was covered in a hard shell that shimmered with colors ranging from deep green to bright blue. It had multiple eyes arranged in a circle around its head, giving it vision in all directions. 2 arms extended from its thorax, ending in delicate fingers that looked surprisingly human. "Captain Holland," the alien said, and its voice came from a translator device attached to its shell. The voice was pleasant and clear with a slight clicking sound underneath. "I am Vixthar of the Kellic species. I thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Greg gestured to a specially designed chair. "Please sit. Can we offer you anything? Water, food? We're not sure what your species requires." Vixthar's body seemed to relax slightly as it settled into the chair. "I require nothing but conversation, thank you. I must tell you something before we begin. My government did not approve this journey. In fact, they forbade it. The Collective Assembly has established a quarantine around human space. All member species are warned to stay away from you. You are considered extremely dangerous." Greg felt his stomach sink. "And yet you came anyway." "I am a scientist," Vixthar said, and Greg thought he could hear something like pride in the translated voice. "My life's work is studying alien species and understanding how different minds think. When I read the report about your encounter with the Assembly, when I saw the data they collected from your ship, I became fascinated. I had to know more. Fear is natural, Captain, but it should not prevent understanding." "What fascinated you about us?" Greg asked. He was genuinely curious. "Most of the galaxy seems to think we're monsters." Vixthar's body shifted. If Greg had to guess, he would say the alien was excited. Your music, Captain, you have over 5,000 distinct musical traditions on your world. 5,000 different ways of organizing sound into beauty. My species has 3 musical traditions, 3, in our entire history, but you create music constantly, in every culture, in every time period, even in your darkest moments. Greg blinked. Of all the things he expected the alien to say, that wasn't it. You came across the galaxy defying your government because you wanted to talk about music. Not just music, art, poetry, stories. The collective assembly focused on your wars and your weapons, but I looked deeper. I found something they missed. In your historical records, I found that during your Second World War, one of your most destructive conflicts, humans still created art. They still wrote poetry. They still made music. Even in concentration camps, even in bombed cities, even in the worst moments of human suffering, your species created beauty. This is remarkable. This is extraordinary. This is not the behavior of a species driven only by violence. Greg sat down slowly. He had never thought about humanity that way. We've always made art. It's part of who we are. It helps us make sense of the world. It helps us express things that words alone can't capture. Exactly, Vixthar said, and now Greg was sure the alien was excited. Your species processes trauma through creativity. You build monuments to remember your dead. You write songs about your struggles. You paint pictures of your hopes and fears. This is a survival mechanism, yes, but it's also something profound. It means you're not just survivors, you're meaning makers. You find purpose even in suffering. They talked for hours. Vixthar asked questions about human art, human philosophy, human religion, human culture. Greg did his best to answer, but he often felt inadequate. How do you explain Mozart to an alien? How do you describe the Sistine Chapel to someone who has never seen it? How do you convey the power of Shakespeare's sonnets across the barrier of species and language? But Vixthar seemed to understand anyway. The alien absorbed everything Greg said, asking follow-up questions, making connections, drawing conclusions. And slowly Greg began to realize something important. The galaxy wasn't a monolith. The collective assembly represented one view of humanity, but it wasn't the only view. Some aliens would fear humans, but others would be curious. Others would want to learn and understand. Vixthar wasn't the last visitor. Over the following weeks, more ships arrived. Each one came alone. Each one defied the quarantine. Each one wanted to understand humanity. A merchant from the Vorilian species came wanting to trade in human books. He had heard that humans wrote fiction, stories that were completely made up but explored real moral questions. His species had never encountered fiction before. They only wrote factual accounts of real events. The idea of making up stories to explore truth fascinated him. A philosopher from the Threnian species spent days studying human religious texts. She was amazed that humans had developed thousands of different religions, all coexisting on the same planet. Her species had one religion that everyone followed. The idea of religious diversity was alien to her, and she wanted to understand how it worked. An engineer from the Koltari species wanted to understand human technology. Not to steal it or copy it, but to learn about the human approach to problem solving. He was particularly interested in how humans developed multiple solutions to the same problem, how human engineers argued and debated and competed with each other. His species worked through consensus, and innovation was slow. He thought maybe humans had found a better way. Each visitor taught Greg something new about how the galaxy viewed humanity. Yes, many species were afraid. Collective assembly had spread warnings far and wide, but fear wasn't universal. Curiosity existed too, and bravery. These aliens who came to First Contact Station were risking their careers, their reputations, sometimes their safety, but they came anyway because they wanted to know. They wanted to understand. Then, 6 weeks after the Frontier Dawn incident, a visitor arrived who changed everything. The ship was familiar. It was the same design as the vessels that had surrounded Greg's ship. It was from the collective assembly, but this wasn't a warship. It was smaller, more elegant, decorated with symbols and patterns that suggested importance. Greg stood in the meeting room again, his heart pounding. Lisa stood beside him, her hand resting on the weapon at her belt. They both watched as the door opened and an alien entered. It was the same species that had scanned the frontier dawn, tall and willowy with shimmering blue-silver skin and eyes like swirling galaxies. But this one wore elaborate robes covered in intricate designs, and it moved with confidence, not fear. "I am Scholar Zendhara," the alien said, and its English was perfect. No choppy translation, no broken sentences, just smooth, flowing words. "I have come to apologize to your species." Greg felt his mouth fall open slightly. "Apologize?" Zendhara moved gracefully to a chair and sat down. Its four arms arranged the robes carefully. "My people made a grave error in judgment. When we encountered the frontier dawn, we approached the situation as a military problem. We saw a potential threat and we assessed it accordingly. We looked at your weapons, we looked at your wars, we calculated probabilities of conflict, and we concluded you were too dangerous to engage with." "That seems reasonable," Greg said carefully. "We do have a violent history." "No," Zendhara said firmly. "It was not reasonable, it was cowardly. We looked at the data we wanted to see and ignored everything else. We saw your wars, but we didn't ask why you fought them. We saw your weapons, but we didn't ask what you were defending. We saw your persistence, but we didn't ask what motivated it." The alien leaned forward, its eyes swirling with colors that Greg was beginning to recognize as earnestness. "I spent the past week studying your species properly, not as a threat assessment, as a culture, as a people. And I have learned something profound. You are not dangerous because you are cruel or evil. You are dangerous because you care so deeply about things. Every war in your history, no matter how misguided or terrible, was fought by people who believed they were protecting something precious. Your families, your homes, your beliefs, your freedom. You fight with such ferocity because you love with such intensity." Greg felt something tighten in his throat. He had never heard it put that way before. "Your weapons are terrifying," Zendhara continued. "You could destroy worlds, but you built those weapons to defend worlds, to protect what you love. Your persistence, your refusal to surrender, it doesn't come from aggression. It comes from an overwhelming desire to survive, to protect, to continue. This is not evil, Captain Holland. This is love wearing armor." Lisa spoke up for the first time. "Not everyone in the galaxy sees it that way." "No," Zendhara agreed. "Many species see only the armor. They see the weapons and the wars and they conclude you are monsters, but they are wrong, and I intend to help them understand that they are wrong." "Why?" Greg asked. "Why do you care what happens to humanity? You could just stay away like the collective assembly wants." Zendhara's colors shifted to something warm and golden. "Because the galaxy needs you. We have become stagnant, comfortable, safe. We have 18 species in the collective assembly and we all think remarkably similar thoughts. We agree on almost everything. There is no creative friction, no challenging ideas, no growth. You are different, you think in ways we don't think. You solve problems in ways we don't solve them. You ask questions we don't ask. The galaxy doesn't need another species like us. The galaxy needs humans." "What are you proposing?" Greg asked. "A cultural exchange program," Zendhara said. "Send us your artists, your teachers, your philosophers, your musicians and your poets and your dreamers. Let them show us how humans see the universe. Let them teach us to think differently, and we will send you our scholars, our scientists, our thinkers. We will share knowledge and perspective. We will build bridges instead of walls." Greg looked at Lisa. She looked back at him. They both knew this was bigger than them. This was a decision for Earth Command, for the governments of Earth. But they also knew it was a good idea. Maybe the best idea anyone had come up with since the Frontier Dawn encounter. "I'll need to send this up the chain of command," Greg said. "But personally, I think it's a wonderful proposal. Thank you, Scholar Zendhara. Thank you for taking the time to look beyond the surface. Thank you for seeing us as more than just a threat." Zendhara stood up, and its robes flowed around it like water. "Thank you, Captain, for being worth the look. I have studied hundreds of species in my career. I have never encountered one as complex and contradictory as humanity. You are difficult to understand, but difficulty is not a reason to stop trying. In fact, it is the best reason to try harder." The cultural exchange program was approved 3 days later. Earth sent its best and brightest to meet with alien species, artists who painted and sculpted and composed music, teachers who explained human history and human values. philosophers who debated the nature of existence and morality. And slowly, the galaxy's view of humanity began to shift. Not everyone changed their minds. The collective assembly maintained its quarantine. Many species still considered humans too dangerous to approach, but cracks appeared in the wall of fear. Individual aliens made contact. Unofficial relationships formed. Trade began in small ways. Ideas were exchanged. And 6 months after the Frontier Dawn encounter, something remarkable happened. Earth received a distress call. A spatial anomaly had formed near the border between human space and collective assembly territory. It was growing rapidly and threatened to destroy everything in its path. Multiple species would lose entire star systems if something wasn't done. The collective assembly asked for help, not officially, not through formal channels, but through back channels and quiet messages. They reached out to humanity, because humans had experience with dangerous situations. Humans had technology designed for extreme conditions. Humans were persistent enough to tackle problems that seemed impossible. Greg found himself commanding a joint mission. The Frontier Dawn led a small fleet that included ships from 12 different alien species. They approached the anomaly together, sharing data and working as a team. It was risky. It was dangerous. Several times they almost lost ships to the churning chaos of distorted space-time, but they persisted, they adapted, they found solutions, and eventually they succeeded. The anomaly was contained, the threatened star systems were saved, lives were preserved, and in the process dozens of aliens got to see humans not as threats but as allies. They saw human engineers working around the clock to solve problems. They saw human scientists collaborating with alien researchers. They saw human captains making decisions to protect alien lives. They saw humanity at its best, and it changed things. Greg stood on the bridge of the Frontier Dawn, watching the alien ships prepare to return to their homes. He thought about that first encounter, the moment when the collective assembly had scanned his ship and fled in terror. It seemed like a lifetime ago instead of just 6 months. So much had changed. So much had been learned. Lisa approached and stood beside him. "It's strange, isn't it? We scared them half to death and now we're working together to save lives." Greg smiled. "Maybe that's the point. They saw what we're capable of destroying. Now they've seen what we're capable of protecting. Both are true, both are human." "Do you think they'll lift the quarantine?" Lisa asked. "Eventually," Greg said. "It's already happening informally. Individual species are making contact. Trade is happening. Knowledge is being shared. The official quarantine is becoming meaningless. The collective assembly will have to acknowledge reality sooner or later." "And then what?" Lisa asked. "What happens when humanity is fully integrated into the galactic community?" Greg thought about the question. He thought about human history, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the terrible, the endless cycle of conflict and cooperation that define the human experience. "I think we'll challenge them. We'll make them uncomfortable sometimes. We'll ask difficult questions and propose radical solutions. We'll be the species that refuses to accept the status quo, and that will be good for everyone, including us." Communication Officer Danny Price called out from his station. "Captain, we're receiving messages from the other ships. They're thanking us, all of them, even the collective assembly vessel." Greg nodded. "Acknowledge their messages, wish them safe journeys home, and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them the mission was successful. Tell them humanity has proven itself as more than just a threat. We're problem solvers, we're allies, we're capable of working with others when it matters." The messages were sent, the ships departed. Soon the Frontier Dawn was alone again in space, just like it had been 6 months earlier. But nothing was the same. Nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had entered the galactic community through an unexpected door, not through demonstrated superiority, not through careful diplomacy, but through honest self-presentation. They had shown the universe exactly who they were, flaws and all, and the universe was slowly learning to accept them. Some species would always fear humanity. That was inevitable. Humans were unpredictable and powerful, a dangerous combination. But other species would be curious. Other species would want to learn and collaborate. And those relationships, built on mutual respect and genuine interest, would be stronger than any based on fear or intimidation. Greg thought about Earth. He thought about all the people back home who had no idea how close humanity had come to being isolated and quarantined forever. He thought about the artists and teachers and philosophers who were now traveling among the stars, sharing human culture with alien species. He thought about the children who would grow up in a galaxy where humans weren't alone, where the stars were full of friends and colleagues and partners. It was a better future than he had imagined. It was a future worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth building with care and patience and hope. The Frontier Dawn set course for home. The journey would take weeks, but Greg didn't mind. He had reports to write, experiences to document, stories to tell, and he had time to reflect on everything that had happened. The moment the aliens had scanned humanity's ship, chaos had indeed ensued. But out of that chaos had come something unexpected: understanding, connection. The beginning of relationships that could span the stars. The galaxy had seen humanity at its worst and had recoiled in fear. But then the galaxy had seen humanity at its best and had begun to understand. Humans were contradictions. They were warriors and peacemakers, destroyers and creators, selfish and selfless, cruel and kind. They contained multitudes that didn't always make sense together, but maybe that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. The living proof that contradictions could coexist, that beings could be complex and messy and still worth knowing. That perfection wasn't necessary for value. The aliens had looked for simple answers and found complicated truths. They had expected monsters and found artists. They had feared weapons and discovered that the humans carrying those weapons also carried dreams and hopes and love. They had seen armor and learned about the hearts it protected. Greg stood at the viewport one last time before heading to his quarters. The stars stretched out before him, infinite and beautiful. Somewhere out there, Vixthar was studying human music. Zentara was preparing a report on human culture. The Vorillian merchant was reading human novels. And millions of aliens were slowly, cautiously beginning to wonder if maybe humans weren't as terrifying as they had been told. It was a beginning, just a beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be setbacks and challenges. There would be species that never accepted humanity. There would be conflicts and misunderstandings and mistakes, but there would also be friendships, collaborations, shared victories, mutual growth. Humanity had made its first impression on the galaxy. It had been chaotic and frightening and confusing, but it had also been honest. And from that honesty, something real was being built, something that could last. Something that could change both humanity and the galaxy for the better. The Frontier Dawn sailed through the stars toward home, carrying with it the story of how humanity joined the galactic community. Not through conquest or submission, not through hiding or pretending, but by being exactly what they were: complicated, contradictory, dangerous, creative, persistent, human. And the galaxy, despite all its fears and doubts, was learning to appreciate that. One alien at a time. One interaction at a time. One shared mission at a time. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibility. And that was enough. That was everything. That was hope.